I wrote a book. I hold it up here. It's called The Big Secret, and I always say it's still a big secret because no one read it. And in that book, I talked about a few studies. Number one, it talked about the best performing manager. I wrote it in 2011. So it talked about the decade 2000 to 2010. Looked at the best performing mutual fund, a study of the best performing mutual fund for that decade. That fund was up 18% per year, 100% long the US equities. The market was flat during those 10 years, so 18% up a year is pretty good. Unfortunately, the average investor in that fund on a dollar-weighted basis managed to lose 11% a year. Because every time the market went up, people piled in. When the market went down, they piled out. When the fund outperformed, they piled in. When the fund underperformed, they piled out. And they took an 18% annual gain and turned it into an 11% annual dollar-weighted loss. Why? Well, to beat the market, if you're beating by 18 points, you're doing something different than the market. You're going to zig and zag differently. You can't do the same as the market. You have to do something different. You're going to zig and zag differently. Institutional managers are no different. Here are the stats on the, if you just took a look at the top institutional managers for that decade, the ones who, 2000 to 2010, the top quartile managers, the ones who ended up with the best 10-year record, here are the stats on them. 97% of those who ended up with the best 10-year record, top quartile, spent at least 3 of the 10 years in the bottom half of performance. Not shocking, but everyone, right? To beat the market, you have to do something different. You're going to zig and zag differently. 79% of those who ended up with the best 10-year record spent at least 3 of the 10 years in the bottom quartile performance. And here's the stunner. 47%, roughly half, of those who, they ended up with the best record, but they spent at least 3 of those 10 years in the bottom decile, the bottom 10% of performers. So you know no one stayed with them, but they ended up with the best record. So it's very hard to pick an allocator because you don't know the thesis, so you're using past returns. But when you do that, all you're doing is chasing your tail, going in and out at all the wrong times. So it's very hard. What a good allocator, usually an institutional allocator, and there are a few of them, should be looking at process and do you stay with your process. But of course, there's agency problems on the side of those people allocating because even if you're on a really good investment board, and you're an allocator and you're head of US equities or you're head of alternatives or bonds or whatever it might be, you have a benchmark. And if you haven't beaten your benchmark for the last 3 years, I'm not saying, at the good places they throw you out, but I am saying they don't throw you a parade. Okay? So it's very, very hard on that. So one thing you can do is do it yourself. And I wrote this other book that you have, The Little Book That Beats the Market. And I just did a simple formula that sort of was like the jelly beans, counting the rows, going across, and just picking the cheap companies to buy. Very simple. And I wasn't running outside money at that time that I wrote the book in 2005. Just wrote up the very first study we did of doing something cheap and good businesses. Just made it pretty easy for you to buy a handful of those. And I kept getting phone calls, hey, could you just do this for us? And so what I did is I set up a website that listed the top stocks. It's still going around, magicformulainvesting.com. And people said, yeah, that's fine, but could you still do this for us? So I set up something called Formula Investing. And I gave people 2 choices. I said, I sort of viewed it as a benevolent brokerage firm. I said, listen, we'll let you do this yourself, but you have to choose from this top list of 30 or 50 stocks, and you have to choose at least 20 of them. Okay, stay out of trouble, and you're supposed to invest every quarter, update your portfolio, and just mechanically do this. You don't have to buy everything, but you have to buy at least 20. And then the person who was running this for me said, you know what? How about you just add a checkbox which said, just do this for me. Just automatically buy. So as an afterthought, I said, fine, we'll do that too. So we ran this for a couple of years, and let me tell you the results. The people who chose their own stocks, from the pre-approved list of the top stocks, they did pretty well. For the 2 years, they were up 59%, roughly. Unfortunately, The S&P was up 62% during those 2 years. The automatic, just do it for me, that was up 84%. So the automatic had beaten in other words, just buying the list had beaten the market by 22 points. But by giving people any discretion, even though the list was pre-approved, just by picking and choosing the ones that they didn't like, but they had to buy at least 20, they managed to take a 22% outperformance in a couple of years, which is pretty good, and turn it into a 3% underperformance. So do it yourself. I wrote a piece for Morningstar called "Adding Your 2 cents May Cost You a Lot," and